Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me thank all my colleagues who have spoken so eloquently here today, and who have echoed the voices of students. I have in front of me here 20,000 students throughout the state of California who have signed the petition in support of AB 101. Gen Up is doing fantastic work in the state of California. We're talking about high school students. And maybe high school students today, unlike high school students in the 1960s, are not marching. And maybe they're not being able to march because of COVID, but they are using technology. 20,000 names on this petition in support of AB 101. High school students know what they're talking about. To my colleagues in the Jewish caucus, thank you. I am proud to have been and am a founding member of the Jewish caucus. Thank you for standing with us. To my colleague from Rockville, as you heard my colleague from Salina say, I was in the classroom for 34 years. I saw firsthand how this curriculum changes the lives of students. I walk around Riverside today, and students come up to me, and they don't thank me, Mr. Medina, for showing me how to conjugate irregular verbs in Spanish. They should, but they don't. Or teaching them the subjunctive, which is tricky. They thank me, and they continue to thank me for what they learned in my ethnic studies class and in my Chicano studies class. Because students teach themselves. Students bring in such rich history, whether there be Native American students, Asian American students, Latino students. They bring African American students. They bring their culture to class. And if they see themselves reflected in the books, in the curriculum, if they see themselves reflected in the teachers who stand in front of them, they learn and they teach each other. And they can teach us. That is what I learned to my colleague from Rockland. And when students are engaged, they are not only engaged in ethnic studies. As my colleague from San Diego mentioned, studies from Stanford University have shown that students enrolled in ethnic studies do better, not only in ethnic studies, but in all classes. Their absenteeism drops. GPAs have gone up. And that is for all students, not only students of color, but all students. To my colleague from San Jose, it reminds me of one of my heroes, whose anniversary of his death is today. 12 years ago today, Professor Ronald Takaki of Berkeley, of Cal University, passed away. His books are being taught in our high schools. I believe that Ronald Takaki smiles on us today, because Ronald Takaki said this story. He was in Washington, D.C. to give a conference, and he's riding in the taxi going to give his speech at the conference. And the taxi driver, just making small talk, asked him, "Where are you from?" I think Ronald Takaki may have answered California. But the taxi driver wasn't happy with that answer. He said, "No, where are you really from?" I don't know if he said Hawaii, because Ronald Takaki grew up in Hawaii. But that has been my experience as well. Many of us have had that experience. To be seen as the other, to be seen as a foreigner in this country, whether we've been here for generations. And it is in classes like ethnic studies that we learn about the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, that we learn about the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Asian land law that affected Riverside, that we learn about the massacre of Native Americans. I thank you all for supporting this bill. I thank you all for voting aye. What we are doing is important for the state of California. I urge you to vote aye on AB 101.